Alright, so starting things out here, we're going to get into our first monster card. The categories of monster, there's a bunch of normal monsters with no effects. The way we're going to categorize them is anything lower than 1400 attack, then we've got our 1400 attack beaters, and then we're going to have anything that's 1500 or above, it's going to be its own category, and those are going to be A's. But Skull Servant is an easy one to start with, that's just going to be a D tier. It's 300 by 200, which is just stats that do not matter. This card you do not want to play. Specifically, this one is one of the worst, but anything with 1400 or below, you really shouldn't be playing. 1300 at the least. But anything other than that, I'm just going to go ahead and put in D's and not really talk about it from now on. Sojin is going to be a little bit higher. Most of the field spells are going to be pretty low. You're not going to be having a lot of the same types. But as we're going to see later, and I'll point it out, a lot of the cards that we're going to want to include in our decks are going to be either warriors or beast warriors. A lot of the B tiers and A tiers are going to fit those categories. And that's why we're going to have Sojin a little bit higher than other ones. The other ones are actually going to be more D tiers, and we're going to see that. Sparks is going to be another D tiers one. It's actually worse than just having a regular monster. Inflicting 200 points of direct damage is never going to be enough. You're basically wasting a card to deal 200 when an opponent has 8,000 life points to start with. It's a fraction of what you need to do. Even though it is direct damage, there's just not enough synergies to actually make this work, especially not for 200 life points. Spike Seadra is B tier. You might be thinking of 5-star monsters, 1600 attack. That sounds awful. No effects, but in this set, this is actually pretty powerful. 1600 attack is one of the highest attacks. It might be at the top of C tier, but you'll either want to play Spike Seadra or Succubus Knight. I'll go ahead and mention this one. This is going to be kind of the bread and butter for what you want for 5-star monsters. You're probably going to want around 4 of these in your deck, 4 or 5. And like I was mentioning before, Sojin does power this up as it's a warrior, but 1650 outclasses the Spike Seadra. You're going to be seeing this guy more often than not, and you'll be surprised how much of the time you'll play a defender or something of the like to buy you time to play this, and this is going to beat most of your opponent's monsters. It just has higher stats than you're going to see most of the monsters here. Spirit of the Tarp is going to be A tier. 2000 defense is going to buy you a lot of time, even though it's not going on the aggressive, and it's better to have higher attack creatures here. 2000 defense is just a lot. It's going to be a big barrier. There's hardly anything that gets through it, so it's something that you'll want to pack as many of these as you can get in the deck. Steel Ogre Grotto, that's going to be the top of the D tier class. It has 1800 defense, which is pretty sizable, and 1400 is going to beat a lot of stuff in the format, but because it requires a sacrifice, it's really not worth it in the deck. It might be the bottom of the C tier, but it's around here. You really don't want to play it. Stop Defense is going to be pretty high up. It's probably just above Spirit of the Harp. Speaking of Spirit of the Harp, if your opponent is playing higher defense monsters, you'll need a way to break through. And if you're playing a lot of Succubus Knights and Spike Seadras as your higher tier attackers, you'll see Spirit of the Harp, there's no way to actually push that damage through. So you'll need to stop defense to actually get through some of those monsters. Swords of Revealing Light is good in this show, and usually it's pretty good, but the problem is this is really only buying you time to play not so great stuff like Succubus Knight and Spike Seadra. It's much better to play higher defense monsters rather than relying on the Swords of Revealing Light. That being said, if you do have 2 sacrifice monsters, this can buy you some time to get there, but I would just take this over any C tiers and D tiers, and probably you want to take all the stuff that we're going to see above it over this, as this is just kind of buying you time. That being said, it does affect the board, and it can help you find, your fissures, your 2-pronged attacks to set things up well. Your opponent's big beaters can't get in. Terror the Terrible lives up to its name. It's pretty bad. Bottom of the C tier, it does have 1200 attack. The most important thing to recognize here is the Fiend type. That's a common among a lot of the kind of upper crust of C's and some of the better B's. And you'll notice that Fiend and Dark kind of are better. You'll have Warriors and Fiends are really the ones to look out for. That being said, you really want to rely on stats for the most part, as when you're drafting, you're not going to get a huge conglomeration of those types. That being said, just look out for those types and you should be okay. Speaking of good warriors, Celtic Guardian is another bread and butter card. 4-star 1400 attack is great in this format. Just solid. You'll notice it'll get through most of your fights with a lot of the trash that's in this format. 13th Grave, again, we're just going to put this top the C tier class or D tier. You really don't want to be playing this. We'll put this D tier. Fury Sea King, again, 800 attack. Nothing to look at. Trap Hole, finally our first S tier. There's not a lot of interaction in this set, so doing any amount of interaction is just amazing. So Trap Hole will get rid of your opponent's beaters that are really problematic. I'd wait for something like a Succubus Knight or a Cursive Dragon or anything that requires a sacrifice or a Red Skull Bird, anything really with 1500 attack or more you want to be using for your Trap Hole. But if you have like Spirit of the Harp, I would just wait. If they're just playing 1400 attack beaters, it's not worth the price. That being said, pick this up early, pick this up often. This is going to be one of your better cards in your deck. Trihorn Dragon, another card that's pretty low quality. This is one of the better ones for 2 sacrifices. 2850 is a pretty good attack for having to do 2 sacrifices. It's going to beat out pretty much everything else in the format, but it's weak to things like Trap Hole and Fissures that opponents will play. So getting 3-for-1 or 2-for-1 for playing this card is pretty painful. Trial of Nightmare is 1300 attack. It's at the higher end of these C tier cards, and you can see it also has the Fiend type. So any synergies with that is going to be improved. Tripwire Beast, 1200 attack. We'll put this at D tier. It doesn't have a good type. Turtle Tiger is another bread and butter card. Its attack is pretty bad, but 1500 defense will stop a lot of things. You'll probably want Succubus Knight over it, but if you have too many Succubus Knights, you'll definitely want to go for these Turtle Tigers. Two-Mouth Dark Ruler, not a lot to say about that. Two-Pronged Attack is another one that you'll want to look out for. Again, like I was saying, there's not much interaction in the format. It is so much worse than Trap Hole, though. It goes in a category below. As you're really 3-for-1ing yourself, you're sacrificing 2 things to kill 1 creature on the board. That being said, there's some really powerful cards like Trihorn Dragon that you'll have to deal with, and the amount of interaction is limited, so you will want to draft these highly. And sacrifice, if you don't have a lot of good things, like if you're doing Trial of Nightmare or Terror the Terrible, getting rid of those 2 to get rid of a Succubus Knight is sometimes what you'll have to do. Typhon, another 1200. Winged Beast is okay, but it's not great. Okay, all fusions go to the bottom of D tier. Do not play any fusions in your deck. None of them are worth it. You're 3-for-1ing yourself for a card that usually doesn't have the attack and defense to justify it. And the chances that you're going to draw all 3 pieces is just too low. So I'd recommend just not playing in the deck. Like I mentioned before, a lot of these field spells are pretty trashy. You're not going to have a huge amount of any of the types to actually justify putting in the deck, and that's why Umi's going below. Again, Warriors and Beast Warriors, we're going to see a lot more upper tier up here, and that's why Sojin's a little bit higher, but you should really put Umi down here. Uraby, great card. It's going to be A tier. 1500 attack is a ton in this format. It's really going to get through most of the attack of other monsters on the board. This is going to be one of your main beaters in the deck. Vile Germs equips to plant types, which are really bad. Same with Violet Crystal, equips to zombies. You're not going to have any of those that you'll really want in the deck, especially common levels. Wasteland is dinosaurs, zombies, and rocks, and there's so few of them, and they're all pretty bad, you won't want it. Witty Phantoms, again up here, another good card. And you'll notice this has a Fiend type as well. So these are the 3 main ones that you'll be looking out for that are pretty good. And that's why you'll see this field spell Yami. It's worse than Sojin, but it is still C tier, as there are these 3 fiends that are in the common level that do get boosted that you could really build your deck around if you are having troubles or if you just want to do something fun. Cursive Dragon goes way up here. It's going to be a hard one to beat. It's probably above 2-pronged attack, but you could, if you have a lot of 5 stars like Succubus Knight, you might actually want to take 2-pronged attack first. But 2000 attack, as talking about before, there's not going to be much things above it, especially only requiring 1 sacrifice. It's going to be a very solid card in your deck. Dark Energy equips to Fiend types, which I've talked about before, are a little bit higher than others. as there's a lot more commons ones that are a little bit more powerful. Then we get Dark Ray, which is just another trash tier. Dark Hole is going to be an amazing S tier card. What you can do is set up situations where your opponent's playing more and more resources. Maybe they're playing their Urbies and you've got a Spirit of the Harp out just defending, and they keep playing more and more attackers, and then you can just Dark Hole all of their creatures out of the game. Or in a situation where they've gotten out Trihorn Dragon and you have more creatures, that's still totally fine. Then it becomes something like a two-pronged attack. This card is one of the best cards in the set. There's only one other one that beats it out, and we'll get to that later. Dark King of the Abyss, just like Terror the Terrible, it's another Fiend. Not as good, but because it is the Fiend type, you'll see these three, 1200, 1300, you can make a Fiend type deck, as well as with Witty Phantom, and this will boost up your guys. Not recommended, usually just go for stats, but if you're in a pinch, that'll work. Dark Magician, unfortunately, is really not that great. It's kind of bottom, I guess top of the C tier. I guess a little bit below Sojin. But you really are looking for a Trihorn Dragon or a Blue Eyes to make the deck. 2500 is really not worth it to justify it in the deck. Okay, another fusion, so we can get out of there. There's this plant type, which you really don't want to play. Aquan Mador, great card. It itself has 1200 attack, and you see we really want to play 1400 and above in our deck, but you can see it goes toe-to-toe with some of the top tier Deuce and some of the low tier C's and attack power, and otherwise it's just an amazing blocker. So Aquan Mador, good card, A card, you'll want to play a lot of these in your deck. Dissolve Rock, just bad stats. Dragon Capture Jar, it's pretty useless. If you're playing best of 2 out of 3 and they have a ton of Cursive Dragons, maybe you bring it in to try and beat it out and you don't have much interaction. And maybe if you see Trihorn Dragons as well, buys you some time, but you really don't want to be playing it. Dragon Treasure, another bad card. Probably a little better than Vile Germs and Violet Crystal, as there's some okay dragons out there, but you really don't want to be playing these cards that require you to have a type out. Another Fusion, another bad card. Electro Whip targets Thunder, which is not a common type and not a good type. Enchanting Mermaid, another bad C tier, or a bad D tier with 1200 attack. Exodia, you're never actually going to assemble this in an actual game. So just look at its stats alone, which is 1000, 1000, which puts it in a D tier class. Fiend Reflection is a winged beast, 1400 defense, which puts it more in the C tier. It goes above the other ones just because it could be a blocker at a pinch, but you really don't want to play it as much. Final Flame, same things that I talked about. Sparks, you might be thinking it's 3 times better than Sparks because it inflicts 600 rather than 200, but really, in actuality, 600 and 200 are basically the same thing when you have 8000 life. Armail, just another bad creature. Firegrass, another terrible creature. Fire You, 1300 attack, which makes it probably in the C tier class. The reason these Fiends make it is because they do have the Fiend type, and there's more Fiend types with 1200 and 1300, and the conjunction with Yami puts these a little bit above. Fire You just has 1300, which itself puts it midway in the C with Trial of Nightmare. Fissure, great card, better than Trap Hole. The reason for this is you can set up situations where Fissure is just killing anything on their board. Trap Hole, you have to play a little bit defensively. You have to play it before they play their big threat. Meanwhile, with Fissure, if they play their big threat and they only have one other creature on the board, you can just destroy that creature. Maybe you trade off with something, or you attack, maybe they have a 1400 beater and you play a 1500, destroy that, then use Fissure to sweep up their big attacker. So this is a little bit more versatile than Trap Hole. I think you're going to run into a lot more situations where you're going to want this than Trap Hole. Okay, another fusion card we don't want. Flame Manipulator, another card that's just bad stats. Another fusion that's awful, another fusion that's awful. Winged Beast is not really a type that we're going to want. Forest is going to be Insect, Beast, Plant, and Beast Warrior. Beast Warrior, there's a few, but really you want to power up Warriors and Beast Warriors rather than just Beasts and Beast Warriors. Frenzied Panda. Panda has 1200 attack, but it's not really a good beater. Armed Ninja is fine. It's really the bottom of the C tier, though. Most of the time, what you're going to run into is you are either going to be destroying a field spell, which are not good anyways, besides Yami and Sojin, and they're built around it, or Swords Revealing Light to get through. If an opponent's smart, they'll just keep their spells in hand. Things like Fissure and Stop Defense, they don't need to actually play in Dark Hole. So they'll actually wait to play it. So the best ones are usually not out on the field. That being said, if your opponent, you see them playing Swords or Sojin or Yami synergistically in the deck, I'd move this up and probably put this in the deck. But I don't think there's a huge draw to actually play it. Okay. Another couple fusions that we don't want to play in the deck. Gaia has the exact same problems as Dark Magician. The only justification I could see is if you play Sojin. But then again, then it just goes up to 2,500, 2,300, which is the exact same as Dark Magician. So really, it's just worse than Dark Magician. Really, you should not be playing this in your deck. Giant Soldier of Stone. Really, really good card. Above Aquamador. Same reasons I like Aquamador, except it is even higher attack, which makes it really good. This has the exact same problems that Sparks and Final Flame both have, which is just directly affecting life totals for one turn without a continual presence on the board is really not going to help you out. The benefit of having 600 more life is really not worth it for having this card just immediately go to the graveyard and not block or continuously attack the opponent. Gravedigger's Ghoul is going to target 2 monsters in your opponent's graveyard and you banish them, which is a bad effect. Even if your opponent, you see them have a lot of Monster Reborns, it's the chances of them drawing it and you being like, haha, I'm going to get rid of your Blue Eyes that gets to the graveyard, the chances of that happening are so low, I would not even play it even if an opponent has a couple Monster Reborns. It's just not going to be worth it in the deck. Green Phantom King has 1,600 defense, which is great. Puts it at the top of the B tier class. Even though it doesn't have a high attack, it doesn't reach up to these 2,000 defensors, but otherwise it's very good. Hain is bad removal. So just like 2-pronged attack and stop defense, you'll want this in the deck to get through a problematic threat like a good defensive card, or you'll bounce one of your opponent's cards that requires a sacrifice. But for most of the time, you'll not want this in the deck. Will you want it above the beaters or the defensive creatures? I don't think so. I think it's actually worse than all of those. But you'll want at least 1 or 2 of these to get around your opponent's threats. Hard Armor, just another bad card. Hinotoma, not going to keep talking about this. This is just Sparks. Okay, next one is going to be the Armored Starfish. And again, it's just a bad stats card. It has 1,400 defense though, so it goes a little less than Turtle Tiger. Spike Seadra, you'll probably want at least a few of these if you don't have Succubus Knights, but you don't really want to pick these up because these will be coming around. People underestimate the power of this card. Okay, Hinotoma Soul, just a bad card. Hitsumi Giant gets a little bit higher. Just like the Dark King of the Abyss, we like this because it's a Fiend type. Hitsumi Giant is a Beast Warrior, which synergizes better with Sojin. You'll see a lot of these guys up here. You have a lot of Celtic Guardians, Succubus Knight, and we're going to see Beaver Warriors are all high-class cards. And those are all Warriors and Beast Warriors, and that's why you can synergize this with Sojin in those cards as well. This is a Warrior as well, but just a bad statted one. A bad Fusion, a bad Fiend. 1,400 defense again, which is why it goes the exact same place as this Armored Starfish. Another bad statted card. Another bad statted card. This equips to an insect, and if you look through the insects, there's really not any good ones that have good stats, which is why you don't want to be playing bad cards to make your bad cards a little less bad is a bad strategy. So you're not going to assemble Exodia. Sorry to break it to you. If you do, I'd be very impressed. It's just going to be hard to draft them all, especially at their rarity. So all of these are going to be probably even lower, like the lowest of the low for monsters in the D tier. Basic Insect is another bad card. Legendary Sword is still a D tier, but it's above a lot of this stuff. You might even want it... You probably want the 1200 attack creatures above it, but if you do have a lot of warriors in your deck, like Celtic Guardians and Succubus Knights, I could see enough justification to run like one of these. Getting things to above 1700 or above 2100 is big game. Not that you're going to do that with Succubus Knight or Celtic Guardian without two of these swords. Lesser Dragon, another bad card. It'll go top of the D tier though because it does have 1200 attack. These are just another two bad statted cards. There's not very good machine type monsters, so you don't want to play this equip spell. Mammoth Graveyard, again it's a 1200, so it'll go top the D tiers, but there's not really good dinosaurs to justify any of the fields or any of the equips that are associated with that. Maneater's another bad plant. Maneater Bug, another S tier. Even better than Fissure. This just points at an opponent's monster and says you're dead. There's nothing they can really do about it. It's just an impossible to deal with threat. I mean, they'll kill it immediately, but this deals with any of your biggest opponent's threats without having to run it through any of the hoops like Fissure or Trap Hole. Run as many of these as you can. That being said, Dark Hole is really better because you can get more than 2-for-1s for that card, while this is always just going to be a 1-for-1. But you should, in a real world, be running as many of these as you can. Masaki is another bad card. It's a warrior, which gives it a little bit more justification. I could see if you're making a warrior and beast warrior type decks, if that's the way your commons are going, I could see running this with Sojin to give it 1300 attack. But then again, that just makes it like a little bit worse than a lot of the B and A tiers, so you're not really getting much bang for your buck. So Beast Fangs, another bad card. It's not even Beast Warrior, it's just Beast, and there's really not many good beasts. Another bad Fiend, Fusion. This is 1400 by 1600, but it does require a sacrifice, which means please do not run this card. It's going to be very, very bad. It's probably mid D tiers, just because of its stat lines. If you're like in a real pinch to get some stats, but really you should not be trying to run that in your deck. Monster Egg is just another bad card. Monster Reborn, that's a good S tier. That gets back your biggest threats, but it's usually more important to deal with your opponent's threats than to bring back your own. This only really works if your best thing is in the graveyard, and if you're being beaten down and your best thing is a Blue Eyes, it's just going to remain in your hand for the entire game. But what you could do is bring back one of your worst creatures and then sacrifice both for Blue Eyes. So it's still an incredibly powerful card. But it is not as powerful as dealing with your opponent's threats or getting 3-for-1s with Dark Hole. Okay, moving on. Mountain Wing Beasts and Thunder, not very common types. You're not going to want this. Mystical Elf goes with the other 2000 defense, but it's not as powerful. Another good thing that puts it a little bit of the Spirit of the Harp is if you are doing the Yami synergies, both Aquamador and Mystical Elf are boosted just a little bit. Okay, Mystical Moon goes for Beast Warrior types, and even though there's some good warriors and some good Beast Warriors, the fact that it doesn't target both means this card is just bad. Mystical Sheep is bad, just bad stats. Same with this one. Beaver Warrior. Finally, we get another bread and butter card. So it's going to be worse than Celtic Guardian, it's going to be worse than Woody Phantom, but it has both good defense and decent offense, and it can work with your synergies with Sojin, which makes this a decent card. Not the best, but not the worst. A bad dragon. It's got 1300 defense, which does put it a little bit higher in the D tiers, but it's still not a card you should play. Just bad stats again. Another card with just bad stats. Polymerization, same reason you shouldn't be playing these fusions. You shouldn't be playing Polymerization either. There might be temptation if you have multiple of these in your deck, like if you have a Gaia and a Cursive Dragon, but it's going to end up losing you the game a lot more times than it's going to justify its existence in your deck. Pot of Greed is going to be another S tier. The question is it going to be better than these removal? I think not. You're going to want to have the removal over these cards, because if you're just drawing into nothing, you're not going to be really winning the game. But a free 2-for-1 is a free 2-for-1. Obviously, Pot of Greed is incredibly powerful if you played the game before. You'll want to run these as many as possible, but I don't think it's powerful as removal for this set. There's not a lot of aquas, so we'll go ahead and put this here. And here's the best card in the set. This reads, make your opponent tilt out of the game, and it's really unfair. Just destroying all of your opponent's creatures gets rid of all of the downsides of Dark Hole. This basically will win you the game. You just wait until your opponent has a big board, then you fire this off and get rid of all of their creatures. It's going to put you in a winning position no matter where you're at the board. Okay, raise body heat. Same reason that we kind of have all of these bad equips down here. There's not really any good dinosaurs to justify that. And you really don't want to have equips that target a single type, as you're going to have probably a good mix of a lot of cards. This is just a bad statted card. Reaper of the Cards, another great card. It has a little less defense than Giant Soldier of Stone, Aquamador, and Mystic Elf, but what you're mostly going to be using this for is to get rid of trap holes and two-pronged attacks, which is a good enough justification to be higher placed than these guys. It might be a little bit worse than Giant Soldier of Stone because that can... Oh wait, no, it has the exact same attack? No, it's much better than Giant Soldier of Stone. Additionally, it's a Fiend, so it works with Yami. This card is pretty darn good in this set. Okay, Blue Eyes White Dragon. The namesake card of the set is just okay. It's better than the Trihorn Dragon. It's got better stats. But spending 2 cards for 1, even if that one has 3,000 attack, is going to be a hard sell. If you have a good defensive deck with lots of Aquamadors and Mystical Elves, and maybe you have a Swords of Revealing Light, I could see running this. But if an opponent plays a Dark Hole, a Trap Hole, a Fissure, a two-pronged attack, you're going to be feeling pretty bad when they essentially sweep the board and you've done it for them. Okay, Red Medicine, same reason. Sparks is bad, and all these cards that just gain or lose life, that's also going to be very bad. Red Eyes Black Dragon, we've talked about this before. This is basically another Gaia the Fierce Knight, a little bit better because its stats are a little bit better, but you don't really want to be playing really bad 2 sacrifice cards. Remove Trap is actually pretty bad. You might be thinking for the same reason that Reaper of the Cards is good, so shouldn't Remove Trap be good? But this is a body in the board in one with high defense and decent offense. This is not going to be doing anything on the board. A lot of the times they're not going to have Trap Hole or two-pronged attack, as these are only 2 cards in the set. When they do, you're going to feel great about this Remove Trap, but otherwise it's just going to sit in your hand or be taking up space. So really the justification for getting rid of this is pretty low. And in fact, this has select 1 face-up trap card. Yeah, this is just awful. There's no really face-up trap cards here, so this is actually an F. More Parts of Exodia that are just terrible. Okay, Root Water is another bad statted card. Sandstone has 1600 defense, but it's a 5-star. It goes in the same place as that other fishy friend that requires 1 sacrifice, which is around the mid D tiers for these monsters around here. It's got a little bit higher defense, but a little lower. Actually, it has the same defense, lower attack, so it's just a little bit lower. Not very good fairies in the set, so you don't want to run that. This is a 1200 attack, which makes it top of the Ds, but you don't really want to be running it. Finally, we get a really, really good beater. Really the best 4-star attacker in the set, which probably puts it above Curse of Dragon. It's around this range. You're going to want to run any of these, as many of these as possible. Even if you're going for synergies like Fiend or Warrior or Beast Warrior, this is just a much better card. You don't need synergies when it just has high attack. And finally, for our last card, this Book of Secret Arts is just another bad card. There's more good spellcasters, but there's not enough to justify putting this in your deck. And that pretty much rounds out the entire tier list. Again, what you want to be focusing on first is removal. These 5 cards, and to an extent, this two-pronged attack are really going to be your removal cards in the set. That's going to let you push through the higher defense cards that are going to be a huge problem and what really slows down the set. And it's also going to get rid of the higher class high star monsters like Blue Eyes White Dragon and Succubus Knight and Cursive Dragon. That being said, you want to be playing for higher sacrifice monsters. Mostly what you're going to be doing is Cursive Dragon, Succubus Knight. I'd recommend probably 5 to 6 of these in your deck total. So maybe like 3 Cursive Dragons, 3 Succubus Knights. Obviously, you're going to try and play as more Cursive Dragons than Succubus Knights, but I'm just saying in general around 5 or 6 of those cards. One of these higher 7 or 8 star cards, and then the rest you should just try and fill out with these beaters. If you have more 5 and 6 and 7 star monsters, you're going to want more of these higher defense creatures. But for the most part, when you're looking at a deck, you should look for these S tiers first, and then just anything 1400 attack or above, you should focus on first. That would be my recommendation. Besides that, the 2 types you should look out for are Fiend and Warriors and Beast Warriors. So if there's any tiebreakers where the stats are the same, just look for those types, and that'll give you good justification. And when you're looking at types as well, Sojin and Yami are the better field spells, and you really shouldn't be taking any of the other field spells, and you really should never be playing the types of spells that just equip to certain types. You're going to run into issues where you're going to have too big a breadth of types of creatures to justify putting those in the deck. But that pretty much covers it.